Thank you all for coming. We finished up business pretty quickly this morning, and no surprises, I don't think. Siney died, so we look forward to going into the interim. There's a lot of work that we have to do in our districts. The COVID virus is obviously still with us, and we are still dealing on a daily basis with constituent concerns and problems and questions. So we will have a very, very busy interim this year. And with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Senator, there's a lot that didn't get done in large part because of COVID-19. What would you have liked to have seen tackled that just didn't make it this year?
Oh, it would be so hard to pick a few things. I think the biggest question I have is how are we gonna make up the time? I mean, when we start session next year, it's going to be interesting to see if we take the bills from where we left them in the process, if we start all over, if we scrap all those bills and try again. So it's going to be very interesting to see how we put together what next session and the session after that is going to look like. We're coming through an unprecedented time. Lots of really substantive bills didn't get heard. A lot of my caucus bills we felt were solid bills and had a lot of bipartisan support. So it's going to be interesting moving forward.
Can you talk about the Student Care 2.0? The governor vetoed the main funding mechanism for that last night. The legislature did not override that veto. So it appears there's no more Student Care 2.0.
Yeah, it was interesting choices on behalf of the governor. We were a little surprised by some of the choices the governor made, but he's talked about his plan for quite some time, and we look forward to seeing how we're going to fund the expansion. We're going to look to the governor for leadership on that. He's talked about the plan, so we're ready to see the plan.
What are some of the options you would welcome?
Well, overall, as far as the budget and finances in the state are concerned, one of the issues that we've always had as a caucus is the fact that we don't believe every option's on the table, specifically revenue-raising measures. We've seen 10 to 12 years of governing with cut after cut after cut, and the time that we've had a couple of good years, it was because the legislature had the fortitude to pass some revenue-raising measures. So we always believe those need to be on the table.
Can I ask you about face masks? So can't help but notice your whole caucus is wearing face masks. Governor earlier this week said he thinks they're personal preference. What are your thoughts? I noticed more Dems than Republicans seem to be wearing them. Why do you think that is?
You can't see me smile with this on either, can you? So, we are following the practices that are recommended to us by health experts and healthcare experts. And we wear the mask not to protect ourselves, but to protect others around us. I can't speak to why some people choose not to do that, but we choose to follow the experts and the medical recommendations and advice that we get.
Do you think that the legislature, there were a few bills in the past couple of weeks that were specifically in response to the COVID-19 crisis, the ones about protecting businesses, healthcare entities from being sued, essentially. Do you think that the legislature did anything to help the average person in light of the COVID-19 crisis in the past couple of weeks?
I will tell you one of the biggest concerns that we've had as a caucus is unemployment. And OESC has been obviously overwhelmed, understandable, but we've had 8 weeks and we're still not on track. And we have thousands and thousands and thousands of Oklahomans who are not getting the unemployment they should be getting. So we are deeply concerned about that. And that is specifically about the virus. There's no other reason for the spike that we've had. So that's been one of our biggest concerns. We also have had concerns, and we've had people talking to us about the concerns that when the courts open back up, we're going to have eviction processes that multiply, and they will. So our caucus is looking into both of these things to find out what we can do. We have worked with Oklahoma Security Commission trying to find a way to get help to our constituents, and to be blunt, it just hasn't happened fast enough.
Yeah, I was wondering the other day, if there was anything the legislature could do. I know you guys don't necessarily have direct control over the OESC, but if there were some bills you could pass to, I don't know, to help that whole mess over there.
I think this is a bipartisan frustration. I have talked to Senator Lee Wright, and I know that he's had concerns and his caucus has had frustration. So I don't think that this is going to be something that the legislature lets go of. I think we're going to continue to push to make sure Oklahomans get what they should be getting right now. And frankly, we haven't heard a very good reason why it's not happening. If we have antiquated equipment and it can't handle the load, we have antiquated equipment because we haven't kept our infrastructure for the state up the last 12 years.
Like you pointed out, Senator, though, it's been 8 weeks. Who's to blame for this?
I don't know yet. I mean, we quite honestly have gotten a runaround more than I would like, and that's been a bipartisan runaround. It's not just my caucus. And we are pushing back and trying to figure out how we can navigate the system and at the same time figure out what the real problem is. We've lost a lot of institutional memory the last few years. The governor has brought in, as is his right, a lot of new people, and it couldn't have been a worse time. And no one knew we were going to have the virus, but we do. And we've lost institutional memory, and having people that were there and had been there for 10, 15, 20 years would have been very, very helpful to navigate the uncharted waters that we're in right now. So that has just added to the problem. Trace?
Oh, yeah, I'm so sorry. Do you have any further statement or thoughts or knowledge of Senator Freeman's situation? I had heard that she was awake, and people are kind of concerned in that regard. OHP said that they believe she'll be treated and released, but I didn't know that he'd spoken.
So I'm happy to answer what I can. Obviously, our first concern is Allison's health and her well-being. We have to be very cognizant of HIPAA rules and making sure her privacy and her medical privacy is respected. I can tell you all that she is stable, and she's been awake, and we're running tests, and that's about all I can tell you. Thank you for asking. We've had so many people reach out, and it's very heartwarming. It's our colleagues in the Senate were all very kind and concerned. So as we get more information and get permission from Allison and her family, you all will be receiving that. But we did do a press release which sort of gave you an overview.
Yeah, the OESC met today, and we voted to transition its consolidate its IT and business services under OS. Mm-hmm. Had you heard that was coming? Do you have any thoughts on that situation?
Yes, we had heard rumblings, and my thoughts are that we've got OESC that is not working the way I think anybody wants it to, and we're sending it over to OMES, which I don't know, no one's explained to me satisfactorily how that's a fix.
Anybody else have thoughts?
I wish we could see under the masks for the facial expressions.
Are there any other topics that didn't get brought up this session that any of you all would like to discuss? As you head into the interim, some of you have races, but looking at State Question 802, are you ramping up your support of that in light of the veto?
802 is been such a remarkable thing to watch because it's had such support from the very beginning. I mean, and we hear this all the time, but over 300,000 Oklahomans want it on the ballot. And I've had people say, well, do people know enough about this? I think one of the things that makes 802 and Medicaid expansion in Oklahoma so unusual as far as issues are concerned is that this is an issue that's been part of the dialogue in this state for 10 years. I mean, we've been talking about Medicaid expansion for over 10 years, and people in the state have been engaged in that dialogue. Some people hated it, some people loved it, but there's been an active dialogue statewide for 10 years about Medicaid expansion. So I think a number of signatures we got is indicative of the interest that the citizens of the state have, and I don't see any reason to think it's going to lose any momentum whatsoever.
Seems like you're 2.0 dead for all intents and purposes.
You know, I don't claim to understand the governor's strategy for what's happened with that, so that's probably a really good question for him. But I will tell you that, again, I go back to he's got a plan, and so we're sure willing to listen to anything he's got to say about how we're going to make this plan work and how we're going to fund this. But I think 802 is on a trajectory to probably pass.
I'm curious, I looked back the other night at Stitt's State of the State and like what he rolled out in that, and it seems that he has not gotten hardly anything from that. I mean, Senior Care 2.0 is maybe a question mark. He wanted to consolidate state agencies. He wanted to give himself more power, or he wanted you all to give him more power. He wanted to expand the equal opportunity tax credit. I mean, why didn't all of those things happen? And I'm curious, I know COVID obviously a factor, but do you think that the strained relationships sort of factored into why some of those things didn't happen?
I mean, that's a really big question with a whole lot of moving parts to it. But I think just from a general overview that there have been strained relations. And in any relationship, when your relations are strained, it's going to slow down what you want to do and what you want to accomplish. So I think that definitely has been part of it. The accelerated legislative session that we had, losing over half the session, not being able to do the committee process, that's been a big concern for us. There have been some issues that were raised the last few weeks that should have gone through the full process. They needed the public eye on it. They needed open hearings. They needed committee meetings. We needed to vet them more properly. And I'm not talking about the COVID. I understand that that's something that we needed to do. But there were some bills that went through, and there were some bills that almost went through that should have been saved for the full process. So we could have public input, so we could have proper vetting. The ad valorem tax exemption on 1595 is a perfect example. You know, we are looking forward to continuing a discussion on this. And but the process needs to be followed when you're going to make these kind of major changes. So we look forward to visiting with stakeholders and visiting all of those exemptions and see what we can do moving forward, but we're going to do it properly through the right process.